All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes. I am your host for the evening. We are going to talk today about two Tom Ford vanilla fragrances, and those fragrances are Vanilla Sex and Vanille Fatale. I'm going to just tell you first and foremost, this is going to be a very short video. Vanille Fatale is way more interesting and better, and you should get it over Vanilla Sex. However, only get them if you're an avid vanilla lover. Now, there's different types of vanilla fragrances, and I don't think either of these two really fall into my type of vanilla. I don't think you can build up a fragrance with a kind of ice cream vanilla. A lot of times you fall into a risk of it coming off synthetic, and I find a ice creamy, light, airy vanilla to just be uninteresting. And the reason why is because when I smell a fragrance like MFK's Grand Soir, and you get a kind of caramelized, creamy, rich, dense vanilla that feels more brown sugared out and ambery, it's a whole different experience, a whole different character, a whole different weight, and it just gives you an appreciation for vanilla in a much more rich and buttery way. And ever since I've smelled Grand Soir, I can never quite go back to just a dry, airy vanilla. And that's what these two fragrances are. But if I had to choose between the two, I think Vanille Fatale makes a lot of sense because it might not have the kind of brown, sugary, caramelized vanilla, powdery, ambery vanilla, creamy vanilla that Grand Soir has, but it utilizes what feels like a very resinous material. So you get this kind of darkened, it's still a very bright, airy ice cream vanilla, but it's much less airy, and it has a kind of caramelization with it due to, I feel like, some sort of light, airy resin, like a LME or amber as well, or a touch of something else. It just darkens it up a little bit to not feel synthetic and give it a little more life and character and warmth and texture. And so if you're ever somebody who's been in the market for Vanilla Sex or Vanille Fatale, Fatale is way more interesting of a fragrance. However, I wouldn't buy either for me personally. I think a lady might consider these fragrances. For me, these vanillas aren't masculine enough. They're not even, to me, perfectly unisex. I think they're extremely feminine leaning unisex claim fragrances. And for men, you really have to start ambering up your vanilla or putting other elements in the fragrance. These two fragrances are very much true singular vanilla fragrances. And that's why I prefer Fatale over Vanilla Sex, because Fatale just has more character and doesn't feel as generic, even though it still is quite linear in that it just feels a little bit more resinous, but still feels like that ice cream vanilla, just tinted a little bit darker. So yeah, if you're ever somebody who's been in the market trying to decide between those two, start with Fatale and then work your way into other vanilla fragrances. Again, I think it's important when using vanilla in a fragrance, especially at the niche level like Tom Ford, you really need to dress it up. I'm not a big fan in general of vanilla being any more than 40% of a fragrance. I think once you start creeping into 50, 60, 70, 80% of a fragrance, the fragrance becomes way more and more and more generic and uninteresting, and almost kind of like it's a cheat code that doesn't work, because most super vanilla forward fragrances are highly dressed up in a caramelization of some sort in the form of tobacco, caramel, resins, citruses on the top. Hopefully I said honey, maybe even an alcohol like a whiskey or a cognac, stuff like that. And so when you size up a memory of like Wajan or Lamal Elixir or anything like that next to just a plain vanilla fragrance, it just feels like they didn't put any effort into it. It doesn't have as much character. It's not rich. It feels faker. And at the niche level, making a super singular vanilla that has no character is almost a complete waste of time. If I want vanilla, I can go get a vanilla candle. I can go to Bath and Body Works, or I can find any clone or designer fragrance that has attempted to do that. A replica makes a very flat vanilla fragrance that smells a lot like the Vanilla Sex fragrance. So start dressing up your guys' vanillas. I think vanilla and amber must go together, but you can replace amber with like a resin or a tobacco or something like that to give it that kind of darkened character. But tread lightly with your vanillas, guys. I like my vanillas subdued the older I get. the most exposure to vanilla I want is like 40%. But the younger you are, I feel like you can ramp it up to about 50 or 60 as long as there's a big emphasis on it being characterized by other elements that kind of make it into something else. If you don't do that, the fragrance is just wildly generic, or it just smells like a bunch of other stuff you've tried before that's better. I hope that was helpful for you, though, in terms of deciding between Vanilla Sex and Vanille Fatale. Though there are many other much better vanilla fragrances than these two, I don't think either of them are worth the money at all. And there's plenty of alternatives of these, as well as just better vanilla fragrances. But if you've smelled either of the two and you like them, go with Fatale. It's got way more character. And if you want the straight vanilla, maybe look into a replica fragrance or something much cheaper. Vanilla is not hard to find. There's even a clone of Grand Soir that's much more of a singular vanilla, and that is Lattafa's Eternal Oud. So you can look into that as well. There's no oud in the fragrance, but sometimes these Middle Eastern houses throw the word oud in a fragrance, and there's none to even speak of. But anyways, I hope that was helpful for you guys. This is the Scent Bubble, doing a comparison as well as some other tangents on a comparison between Tom Ford's Vanilla Sex and Vanille Fatale, and I hope it was helpful. Sound off in the comments if you guys need anything, and stay blessed.